Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Henry Coles from IATA. I am the head of airline distribution standards based in Geneva. Thank you very much for joining us today to discuss the changes to passenger standards governance that we have taking effect this year and the impacts on the Strategic Partnership Program. So I'm joined today by my colleague Rabi Kikano from our Strategic Partnerships team. I'm going to run through the changes to the governance structure that will be taking effect and some of the impacts that has on our standard setting activity. We'll then briefly run through the changes that this brings about to our strategic partnership program. And if you have any questions, we will address those at the end of the session. So if you have questions on the governance structure itself, I can address those for you, and any questions on the strategic partnership program, Rabi will address those also. So on the webinar today, if you would like to raise a question, you simply need to type that into the question box, and we will address those when we get to the end of the presentation. So many of you on the webinar today will have seen some of this material before. None of this is brand new. These topics have all been discussed fairly robustly in a lot of different groups over the last 12 or 24 months as we've worked through these governance changes. So in terms of IATA's governance, we have the industry committees that report through our Director General to the IATA Board of Governors, and then we have the traffic conferences that develop and adopt standards that report directly to the IATA General Meeting. So strategic partners are involved in many different IATA groups, and the changes we're talking about today impact just the Passenger Services Conference and the Passenger Tariffs Conference. So those are 2 of our 6 traffic conferences, and at this point there are no other changes to any of the other IATA groups. In terms of how we develop passenger standards today under the Services Conference and the Tariffs Conference, many of you will be familiar with this picture. So over time, we've had more and more groups that have slowly been added to the structure. We have a lot of standards that are developed under the Services Conference, but we still maintain the pricing automation standards under the Tariffs Conference. And that structure has become increasingly hard to manage, and it's also become increasingly confusing for airlines to work out where conversations are occurring. So we have end-to-end passenger standards that are sitting across 2 conferences, and this creates an inherent inefficiency because airlines are attending 2 conferences to vote on standards. And we also increasingly have the situation where the groups reporting to the conferences, the scope of each group is becoming a little bit unclear, and some of these groups are starting to cross over a little bit in what they're discussing. And that's particularly so with the transformation programs we're now running at an industry level, things like NDC and One Order that are seeking to fulfill similar requirements to today's existing processes around pricing, ticketing, and reservations. So what we're lacking in this structure is a layer or groups that provide direction across individual business domains. The Strategic Partnerships Program today kind of allows strategic partners to access all of these groups in different ways and in different forms. And the Strategic Partnership Program has also kind of grown along with the structure of the groups. So we end up with a situation where the groups are a little bit confusing and complicated, but the Strategic Partnership Program is also a little bit confusing because there's so many aspects to it, and it's hard to work out where you need to be involved. So we embarked on this process 2 years ago to start looking at re-engineering the passenger standards governance. And what we really tried to do is to move away from the framework we had today, where all the groups were based around very process-centric structures, and move towards something that was much more agnostic to what airlines were doing and looked at activity from a business domain perspective. And the idea here was to make sure that whatever we were doing was completely future-proofed, so that if something came along in the future, we'd know exactly where in the structure it needed to be discussed. but also to resolve some of those problems where the emerging standards were starting to fulfill very similar requirements to the existing standards. So if you look at that flow of scheduling, reservations, pricing, ticketing, that's kind of how distribution works today, and it's how we had structured groups under the conference. And that works fairly well today, but it doesn't really work for things like NDC in one order, or for any other emerging areas of standards where we're doing things differently. So with that in mind, what we came up with, working very closely with airlines, was a new framework for passenger standards under the Services and Tariffs Conference. And that was drafted into a new resolution, Resolution 009, which was adopted by member airlines last year in the Passenger Services and Passenger Tariffs Conference. So that was unanimously adopted by airlines to take effect from the 1st of November this year. So what does the new structure entail? First and foremost, we're merging the activity of the old Passenger Services Conference and the old Passenger Tariffs Conference into a single structure. So while the two conferences still continue to exist on paper, in practice they're managed together as a single kind of entity, and the structure is combined so that it's much more efficient and it's much easier to navigate. So in addition to the merging of the conference activities, the other key change is that we've created these management boards. And so those are management groups that have oversight of individual business domains, and they steer the activity that occurs within those domains from a standard settings perspective. So that's something we never really had before in the structure. We had a whole lot of technical groups that reported directly to the conference, and it was only the conference itself that provided any aspect of steering or direction or management. So what this structure gives us is 3 very different types of groups and 3 different functions. So we have the conference itself and its steering group, which is where every member airline comes along to vote. We have the management boards that are overseeing the direction and strategy in each domain, and then we have groups under each board that each board can create to oversee the technical development of individual areas of standards. So in terms of how each of those layers kind of works, firstly, the conference itself. The conference itself really doesn't change too much, except for the fact that the Services and Tariff Conference activities are merged together. So we're still anticipating we will run this as an annual face-to-face meeting. There's a potential that there may be mail votes and that type of thing, but we're running this together as one activity. So every airline still exercises one vote. The conference is there to adopt changes to resolutions which bind airlines and recommended practices which provide guidance to airlines. The conference may also delegate some authority down to the management boards to develop non-binding standards. And this occurs today in a number of areas, but it's just a little bit unclear and it's not done in a very consistent way. So Resolution 009 gives us a much clearer framework in which the conference can delegate activity to the boards. We also have a new steering group of the combined conference, and this steering group is somewhat strengthened from where it is today. It will be the chair and vice chair of each of the management boards, and so that will be formed next year once the boards are mobilized, and that group will oversee any kind of activity between meetings, and it will also discuss any issues that cross over different boards. So the boards themselves are a new kind of layer in the structure. It's something we haven't had before. The boards will be comprised of airlines only, and they will be elected by the conference to serve 2-year terms. The activity of the board is around strategy, management, and oversight. It's not around technical expertise or hands-on development of standards. So the boards themselves will ensure that the roadmap within their business domain is clearly articulated and that the right groups are in place to deliver on that roadmap. They will also have discussions around implementation of standards and airline priorities in each business domain. So what we're trying to do is move away from technical groups developing standards for the sake of it and move towards a framework where we're really only spending time on things if airlines have a commitment to implement. And I know that's a frustration that many people have in the industry today, and we're hoping that the new governance framework will give us a strong platform to address that frustration. The most important role of the management boards is that they will create and disband groups to develop specific areas of standards. So we move away from this picture we have today where we have a whole lot of technical groups reporting directly to the conference that kind of sit there. Once they're created, they sit there and they don't go away. We're moving towards a framework where the boards establish working groups and they only ever exist for 12 months unless they're re-established by the board. So the group has to have a clear work plan. The activity of the group needs to fit into the strategy of what the board's trying to do in their domain, and there's a clear accountability. So finally, the groups under the boards, these will work very much in the same way that a lot of our technical groups work today. So they'll be comprised of subject matter experts, both from airlines and strategic partners, and the group will be formed to develop standards in a specific area. So we're going to run these in a fairly open way, just as we run a lot of our technical groups today, where really any member airline or any relevant strategic partner is able to come along and be involved. But what we're also trying to do is establish a concept of a core membership. So if the group is established, there's at least a core group of people who are committing to seeing the activity through and to participate in that group's activity for the whole period that the group is endorsed. So to that end, each of these groups will have a terms of reference. The terms of reference might refer to a core membership group, but the group will be managed in an open way so that people who are interested in topics can come along and participate. So the idea with the 12-month mandate is that this makes sure that the structure is agile and we don't have groups that are sitting there if they're not required. But clearly some of these groups have a fairly long tail on them. So if you look at areas of standards like ticketing or pricing, clearly those standards are not going away in 12 months' time. But under the resolution, those groups reporting to the boards would just require re-endorsement every 12 months. And that just makes sure we've always got our eye on what the group's trying to achieve and that the board has oversight of what is on their work plan. So the resolution was adopted last year to take effect from the 1st of November. What we have done over the last 12 months is we've worked very closely with a small group of airlines, which is the Governance Transition Committee. And that committee was created by the conference last year in October, with a 12-month mandate to work with IATA to set the structure up. So what we've worked on with that group is an initial setup of the groups under each board. So the boards have complete authority to create groups, disband groups, restructure activity. But just to get things moving from the 1st of November, we've worked with the Governance Transition Committee to create a kind of skeleton of these groups. And this will be presented to the conference on Monday the 22nd of October for endorsement, so that we have a structure in place from the 1st of November. So you can see under each of the 5 boards, each of those bullet points represents a group that's been created with its own terms of reference to oversee specific areas of standards. So all the existing activity we have within the structure is covered there. And we also have a few new areas where we've created a group to start exploring that. So an example of that is the interline group under the plan board. And the idea with that is it will be a group of kind of experts looking at industry interline agreements, the meter agreements, and other areas of standards touching multilateral interline. That's not something we've had a dedicated group for before, but it's something that there's a bit of a need to discuss and to have a group of owners. Similarly, under the pay account board, we've got some new activity around fraud and customer payment. So now kind of taking this from the governance aspect to the involvement of strategic partners, I guess first and foremost, strategic partners play a really important role in all the work we do with standards. So we quite literally couldn't do our standards development activity without strategic partners. They bring expertise and they bring the capability for airlines to implement a lot of the standards that we develop. So there's a few new ways that strategic partners will be able to engage with airlines and with the standard setting activity within this new structure, and some new opportunities that strategic partners haven't had under the existing framework. The first of those is that each of the 5 management boards under the resolution can establish an advisory forum. So while the board is airline only, they can establish an advisory forum for senior level engagement with strategic partners. And this is something that we've had to a small extent in some specific areas. So we have a little bit of this type of thing happening under the NDC program today. We have the recently created Distribution Advisory Council linking the services conference with the agency conference, and we have some senior engagement there. But what we're trying to do is really strengthen this and build a forum in every area of standards, so that senior managers from the strategic partners can discuss issues with senior managers from airlines, and to take the conversation away from a purely technical conversation and move it towards strategy, direction, implementation, kind of industry level challenges. And so that's something we don't have today, and we're excited about this and introducing this into the framework. The second area of involvement is obviously the groups under the boards. So this is kind of more of the traditional interaction we've had with strategic partners, having SMEs from strategic partners involved with the discussions with SMEs with airlines. So the new framework gives us a whole lot of new groups. It gives us the ability to create groups very quickly, and all of these groups will have full involvement of the strategic partners. So to kind of tidy up what we're doing with the governance structure and the strategic partnership program, what we are doing from the 1st of November is restructuring the strategic partnership program in terms of how it interacts with passenger standards governance, and we're creating 4 new strategic partnership areas. So it's fairly simple. These areas directly align with 4 of the management boards. So we have a new area around plan standards, a new area around shop order standards, and a new area around pay account standards, together with a new area supporting architecture and technology strategy. So the idea with these new areas is that if you sign up to the area of strategic partnership, you get immediate access to the advisory forum created by the board. You can send a senior delegate to the advisory forum to engage with airlines, and you get immediate access to any of the groups that are created under the board where strategic partnership involvement is permitted by the terms of reference. So we're hoping that this creates a framework that is much easier to understand, and it's also much more flexible, because any new groups that the board may create, any new area of standards we might explore, provided you're signed on to that strategic partnership area, you get immediate access to all that material. As we move more of the standard activity online, you also, as a strategic partner, get immediate online access to any of the materials, agendas, minutes, development items, kind of proposals under any of the groups that the board has created, and that's immediately available online. And similarly, materials that are coming out of the advisory forum. So even if you aren't able to attend the face-to-face meetings, you've got an opportunity for complete visibility, and in some cases, an opportunity to provide input into these standards also. So the other key change here is that in terms of the conference itself, we still are welcoming strategic partners to participate in the face-to-face meeting of the new combined standards conference. And how we've structured this is that if you join the plan, shop order, and pay account areas, so those 3 areas, you have immediate access to the passenger standards conference itself. So that's fairly similar to how things work today with the airline distribution standards program, but it's just kind of adding to the flexibility of the program that you're welcome to participate in one board, and if you'd like the access to the standards conference itself, you just need to join those 3 boards. So that's plan, shop order, and pay account. In terms of the annual pricing, what has been developed here is a separate price for each board. And there's just a couple of points I'm going to make here. The first is that on the travel standards, the strategic partnership program touching the travel standards will actually remain just as it is today. So we have the passenger experience program or the baggage services program, and so those are continuing just as they do today. So it just operates slightly differently from the other boards. And the other key point to note is that the Architecture and Technology Strategy Board, you are able to join that as a standalone program. But if you join any of the other 4 boards, you're actually able to access that program completely free of charge. So if you're participating in the shop order program, you're able to participate in all the groups and activities under the shop order board, but free of charge, you're also able to participate under the architecture and technology strategy groups. And same goes for any of the other business owning boards, and that just ensures that you have complete visibility and complete involvement on both the business side of the standard and also on the data exchange and technical side. I guess just the final point to note before we open for questions is that we're continuing to migrate activity and groups onto our online collaboration platform, which is the standard setting Workspace. This is going to happen in a big bang in the middle of November when the new governance and all the new groups are in place. So we've slowly been migrating different groups onto a kind of pilot version of this platform. We have a brand new version with a new user interface that goes live in October, and as we gear up for that new platform, we'll be bringing all the new groups of the new governance structure onto the platform at the same time. So that will give a whole lot of kind of simplicity around navigating all the different groups. They'll all be in one spot. There's no longer a need to join a whole lot of different extranet sites. And you'll also have much more visibility around who in your organization, but also who in airlines is participating in all these different groups. So in terms of where we go from here, the new structure of the groups under each board will be presented to the PSC on Monday for endorsement. As soon as we have that endorsement from the PSC, we will push out communications around the new groups to all the existing participants in each kind of area of activity. And we will get those new groups populated with the core members and get them set up on the online collaboration platform so that everyone's visible, the activity is visible. And we will also have the elections for the 5 management boards that will occur at the PSC on Monday. So as soon as we have those boards in place, those board meetings will start to occur. We have the first one scheduled for architecture and technology in November. We have shop order in January, and the remainder of the boards will follow from there. So the first meeting of those boards will be airline only, and in that meeting the airlines will determine start determining their roadmap, reviewing the work plans of the groups underneath them, but they will also create those advisory forums and talk about scheduling meetings. So we will be in a position very early next year where we can start sending communications out to strategic partners around the advisory forums and get those into calendars. So that's really all we had to run through today. I'm hoping that you are as excited as we are about these changes and the opportunities you have for engaging with airlines and engaging in the standard development activity. We're very happy to take questions at this point. If you have questions on the governance, I can address them, and I have Robbie here from Strategic Partnerships who can address any questions you might have about your agreement or about the Strategic Partnership Program aspects. Similarly, if you have a question that you're not comfortable asking in front of everyone, you're most welcome to contact us directly and we can give you a quick call. So if you do have any questions, you just need to type them into the question box on the webinar. Unfortunately, you can't kind of speak on this webinar tool, you just need to type them in. So I'll just give it a minute or two if anyone had any questions, otherwise we'll wrap up. So we've just got a question around the cost of the strategic partnership program, and whether this is changing. And so the answer to that is yes, it will. So from the 1st of November, the annual pricing of new signups will change to the new pricing model, and this is by board. But obviously, if you have an existing contract that you're working under, that contract will continue to be honoured. So if you have any individual questions about kind of where you're at with your contract, please feel free to contact us directly, and we can talk about that with you. But if you're re-signing from the 1st of November, the new pricing will apply. So, question about whether we can have the information shared, and absolutely we can. So we'll make sure that everyone that's on the webinar today has a copy of this presentation together with the new product sheets. Okay, so I think we'll wrap up at that point. Thank you very much for your time today. As always, we appreciate your involvement in this activity, and look forward to even more collaboration moving forward. So if you do have any questions, please let us know. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.